thank you for agreeing to do this roundtable and be here. This is going to be really important for us today, not only for the statement that it makes in the moment, but for the foundation it lays for us to do the work that we know we have to do going forward. So my pledge to you is that we will continue to do the work that we need to do to make this world a better place overall. And again, I thank you for starting us off like this.
If we could just start off and talk a bit about, well, one, I would like for you all to sort of take turns in introducing yourself and then reflecting on your experiences as Black athletes, Black student athletes, coaches, and also professionals in athletics. And then you can, sort of start from the beginning and talk about where you're at now and share some of your own experiences as an athlete with anti-Black bias and racism, and ideally, how would you like these issues to have been addressed, and then also talk a little bit about what support would look like in those situations where you experience bias and racism. So if you could start off just by introducing yourself, and you can also share some of those stories. And if you need me to repeat the question, I definitely will, because it was like 3 questions in one.
I'd be willing to start off. My name is Abbas Sala. I'm a rising senior on the men's basketball team. I'm a co-president of ADI, which is the Swarthmore Athletes for Diversity and Inclusion. And as far as like my experience at SWAT as a Black athlete, as a Black man, I'd say it's a lot of the stuff that occurs is rather passive. And because it occurs in that form, you just deal with it, and I guess sometimes you just internalize it and keep it moving. Don't even realize what's going on and what's occurring. I've had run-ins, with coaches. Remember one last year, it actually occurred in Chris's weight room. Thankfully, Chris is there and is someone who is an advocate for me and is always going to hear me out. And help me figure the situation out. And I won't get into the specifics of the situation, but I do think an important part of when there are, you might run into bias or you're not being treated with the respect that you think you should and that you deserve, that there's an advocate in the room. So it's not just you against the administration, or it's just you against coaches. I was talking to one of my close friends, Cam Wiley. He got into a situation with, a coach from another school, and eventually was made to apologize to this coach when he really didn't feel like he was in the wrong. And hearing him talk about that, hearing the pain that he expressed, it made me realize the need that you need to have someone in the room who's advocating for you, because these structures aren't, system is against you. So yeah, if I'm just talking about my experience, if anything, I would have liked more people like Chris, more people who are working with me as much as they're working for SWAT.
Thank you, Abbas.
I can follow up with that. My name is Andre Butler. I work with baseball at Swarthmore. So playing baseball, I'm originally from North Philly, so inner city kid who plays baseball. So I've always been the only one. I've always been what they call the token, because we know that not a lot of Black kids play baseball. So I've experienced, the white culture since I was young, since I was 12 years old. And for me, I look at this whole situation, what's going on with, equality, or the lack of equality in the world, is folks just aren't understanding how to know what the Black culture is like from the start. And what this young man was talking about is, life is hard. Like, let's lay the facts. Like, it is hard being Black in America. Let's not ignore it. So for me as a student athlete, and especially as a young kid, when I was a young kid, it was extremely hard for myself to speak up. And I know a lot of my peers, it was hard for them to speak up if they were the only Black kid playing on their teams. So in general, it just, I've gotten a lot better with it where I am not afraid to speak up, regardless of that. It includes me losing my job, losing friends, losing family members, because I believe that that is what is right. But I think overall, the more that folks can get a chance to experience other cultures, and I think we start doing that on Swarthmore's campus a little bit more, it'll make situations a lot easier when they do come about, because we're all coming from different backgrounds, and a lot of people are coming from different family and households that have a belief, and Black folks have their own belief too, and I think that needs to be met in the middle, so that folks can understand different cultures and make this world a little bit of a better place.
Thank you, Andre.
I'll tag on to some of the points that Andre brought up. Hi, I'm Catherine Riley. I am a Swarthmore College alum, class of 2010. I played softball when I was a student here, and now I'm an assistant professor in the chemistry and biochemistry department. And in my free time, I help the women's team now. I never got to compete with or against another Black athlete in my entire time at Swarthmore. Because softball, much like baseball, doesn't have great representation. And in some ways I was prepared for that, because I didn't have that many opportunities growing up to play with other people who looked like me. But in other ways, it just was sort of exhausting to continue to play at the next level and to continue to have to kind of assimilate into a culture that isn't wholly mine. In some ways, I think that's benefited me now that I'm in academia, and I again find myself as the only person of color in the room sometimes. But it does just sort of add to that daily grind of what it is to be Black in America, whether you're experiencing microaggressions or not. There's something that can feel really isolating about being the only. And so that's something that I've felt in so many aspects throughout my life, both in my academic and my athletic life.
Thank you for sharing, Catherine. Candace?
I'm Candace Signer Brown. I'm the head women's basketball coach here at Swarthmore. And, I just, in talking about, microaggressions, I think that having the opportunity to come from a predominantly white institution into another predominantly white institution, I would agree about the microaggressions. One experience that continues to stand out for me in my career is, when we get off the bus on travel, so often I'm overlooked and my assistant is addressed as the head coach. And it's just really interesting and always kind of tickles me on the inside that immediately I am, as a Black female, am dismissed as the head coach, and my white assistant is, greeted as the head coach. And I just think that, in my professional career, it's one of those things where you don't necessarily address it because it's, again, a microaggression. And I think that in America, people always tend to think that, Black people can't be in a position of power, or, that you are always going to come second to your, white counterpart. And I think that that is something that has always kind of, bothered me. But I have learned to, look beyond it and try to educate my peers in understanding that, I have put in my time. I have been just as successful as my white counterparts. It has nothing to do with the color of my skin. And I think that that is, one of the things in my own personal experience that has really been something that I deal with on a daily basis, working at predominantly white institutions. And, as we continue to move forward in the work that needs to be done within our country at Swarthmore, I think that just educating other, white people about, just being sensitive and then also not having stereotypes, I think would be ideal, because so often the stereotypes are so incorrect.
I can share next. My name is Samantha Barnes, and I'm a rising junior. I'm on the women's soccer team. And I mean, I share a lot of the same sentiment as a lot of you guys. For me, it's been like that same thing of loneliness. Since all my years playing soccer, which is a pretty white sport, like baseball and softball, have been like one of the only Black females on the pitch. And like, thankfully, I recognize this all the time. Like at SWAT, you look at the rosters. I mean, a lot of the sports and athletes in general, Black athletes, we're a minority. Like there's not many of us. You can count them on a hand. And I'm so thankful that my team, especially this year, has become a lot more diverse. And in doing so, like that's made talking about some of these issues a lot more easier. And you feel like people are receptive and there's more camaraderie, and I think a much healthier atmosphere. And a lot of that I thank to my upperclassmen, specifically Sophia Stills. Like even my year, I was the only Black person and she was the only upperclassman who was also Black. And like just in a year, that's changed a lot with with this incoming freshman class this year. And like that's allowed for a lot of healthy discussion, and something that's, I guess, if you want to look at how we can support our experiences and some of the things that we struggle with as Black people, one thing I'm really, really proud that our team does do is we just support each other. Specifically, we're one of the teams that has some of the most athletes that are driven to kneel during the anthem. And even our coach has told us, like, we've gotten a lot of angry fans, like emails and stuff like that, and he's protected us. And he's, despite like we may not always see eye to eye on some of these issues, but like no matter what, he supported us. And I think some of this representation, like if we see that on other parts of the athletic department, that would be really powerful. So just like having that experience for me, I think is really special. I have felt that same loneliness, but I think right now I definitely have that privilege of being able to share that burden with fellow teammates. So I think that's really important.
Thank you. Chris?
Hey, my name is Chris McPherson. I'm the Director of Sports Performance here at Swarthmore College. I grew up being a track athlete, so track is a diverse sport where I went to school. Our team was diverse, so I grew up in New York, so I was fortunate to have those different cultures around me to learn from, and I appreciate that now. Well, when I went to college, I had a whole different experience. My team was predominantly white, but I was singled out by the police a lot while I was a student athlete, especially it was in the city of Philadelphia. So when I would go practice, sometimes a police officer, sirens coming down, asked me, what am I doing here? Fully dressed in athletic gear with teammates. There were times when even plainclothes officers would come down in unmarked cars. I remember one time an officer came out, guns drawn, had no idea what was happening. And I was actually thankful enough his partner said, that's not him, because I really thought I was going to be shot. And that's what makes it so hard. Every time I see a video of a police officer doing something to a Black man that they did nothing, because on numerous times that could have been me. And that's what makes it so hard. And with a lot of you said, it's hard. It's hard being the only Black person or Black male, Black female in your sport or in your position as a job. Like, I know in my profession, there's not really that many Black males or females in the position as a strength and conditioning coach. And when I see like an intern or undergrad student who's interested in, they're like a person of color, they're like excited to see a person of color in my position. And that's what just makes it hard. And then just during this time, it's I feel like there is a change coming, so I am optimistic, but it's happened so many times before. A part of me is like, it's just gonna be the same thing. But I'm a person that's always positive. My athletes can say that. People I know that, and I just always gotta stay positive. You know, hope things can be a part of that change.
Thank you, Chris.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Kwani Smith. Came into Swarthmore about 2 years ago as the hurdles and sprint coach, relay coach at Swarthmore. And I would say generally at Swarthmore, I haven't experienced many microaggressions or any much racial tension or anything like that. I think I might save more of the personal things that I've been through for later on in the conversation to get a little deeper. But I do want to say, similar to what Chris said, when I was in high school and coming up, and when I ran club track at Penn State, and even at Swarthmore, we have a good mixture, good diverse culture, different athletes from different areas, even athletes from different countries. And one thing that I think that hits home for me in terms of our roots as people of African descent is how you pronounce someone's name. And I think that in this country we shy away from culture by trying to make things like easier. And I think that something that goes a long way, which kind of goes unnoticed, because my name is African, and growing up, I'd probably say only a handful of teachers pronounced my name correctly. And growing up, people thought it was funny to say my name the wrong way. And to me, that was disrespectful to my culture. If they did it over and over and over again, if you get someone's name wrong a couple of times by accident or just mispronounce it by accident, I don't think that that's much of a microaggression. But if you're, doing it on purpose to make fun of someone, or you just don't want to say it correctly and you want to shorten it to an Americanized version, I think that that's pulling away from someone's roots. So one thing that I like to do as a coach is make sure that I'm pronouncing an athlete's name correctly, whether it's from another language or whatever the case is, because I want to know what your real name is, like who you identify as. I don't want to shorten it unless if you insist on that. And I don't want to change it to like, I think a lot of kids like that might come from Africa or Asia. They like to come up with an American name and say their name is Matthew or something like that instead of telling their real name, which I'd much rather call you by your real name out of respect for, what your parents have done or named you, and, that's how you identify. So I think that as coaches and as administrative staff, athletic staff, I think that that's something that can go a long way, because you can connect with an athlete on a higher level if you do that. But I think also as a track coach, I think that this is kind of, in a way, a positive thing. But I think this happened to me in high school too. But I think that as a sprint coach, because in the Olympics and the higher levels of track and field, all the fastest people are generally Black or of African descent, are from the Caribbean. So I think some athletes, and I've been told this mainly when I was coaching high school, that some students felt more comfortable with me as a coach because I was Black, and they felt that I was more knowledgeable on the subject versus someone who wasn't Black, someone who was or someone who came from another background. Because I know that in track and field, a lot of the times schools don't want to hire a track coach. They just want to take the football coach or the basketball coach and somebody who kind of ran track when they were younger and throw them in there and just pay them to do it. And, that's somewhat of a misrepresentation of track and field in the sports world. But I think that some athletes are just more comfortable, and they've told me, they've actually personally come up to me and said they were so happy that they had a coach that was Black. I guess they felt that they could identify with me and actually listen to and take in the things that I was giving them as a coach. So, I think that that's a positive way to look at it, and kind of shows what some student athletes are looking for when they do take things to the next level, like in college. But I think that generally at Swarthmore, people looked at my credentials first. They didn't look at whether I was Black or not. And I felt like I was hired and brought into the program because of, how knowledgeable I am versus if I was Black or not. But I know that in my past, people have expressed to me that the fact that I was Black made them more comfortable, and they felt like I was the right coach for them.
Thank you. Tobin?
Yeah, so I'm Tobin Adams. I am the Assistant Athletic Director at Swarthmore for internal operations. So speaking of microaggressions, I echo all the sentiment as everyone pretty much that already spoke. I'll give you a little personal story about myself here. So growing up in the inner city, very close community to Swarthmore and Chester, going to school with predominantly Black kids, and then getting the opportunity at high school. I moved to Delaware and went to a school where it was about 50-50. So it was a total shock for me. Being an athlete, I played football. It was going and playing with kids who they all looked like me and they were all fast, big, strong, to now I'm playing with different kids that don't look like me, different upbringing, maybe stronger, faster than me. But it was definitely a difference in our cultures. And then having the opportunity to play collegiately at Bloomsburg, one of the memories that I have that will never leave me, and every time that I see riot gear, it kind of perturbs me because of this experience that I've had, was we had our homecoming football game, and I get emotional about it because it's like Chris, it touches my heart, and so it was we were on campus at a campus facility where our public safety was a full police force was on campus. And this particular party, we had to go through security to get into the venue, which was, again, a campus building, I say. And so we're through security. At this point in time, it's really cold outside. If you can imagine, it's football season. So there's students. We're standing outside. It's a largely Black community as far as the ones who are attending this party. We go inside. We've already been through metal detectors and through security. And then we see police come through the back doors in riot gear, saying that we were rioting at this party and we had to leave. I mean, they had guns pointed at us. I mean, this is actually the inaugural weekend for our president of our university at that time as well. So it just left a stain to me and for me that we were being celebrated at 1 o'clock, but at 7 o'clock, you're student athletes, you're having guns pointed at us and shields pointed at us when we've already went through metal detectors. Like, we were the threat. You were more of a threat to us than we were to you. And that experience stays with me, and forever will taint a little bit of my experience as a student athlete. And then as an administrator, I am grateful, one, to be a Black administrator, which there's not a lot of us. And I am fortunate, and it is my work, I feel, that to help guide along future student athletes or anyone in the sports field who want to get into this business, to try to mentor as much as I can, and because I have a mentor as well. So I feel like for us, it's having and reaching back to people who look like us and trying to give them opportunities because it was someone who looked out for us to get us an opportunity.
Thank you, Tobin. There was something that that Chris said, and that many of you have mentioned too, and that is, this is not the first time that we're dealing with this, right? It's almost like waking up in a nightmare or waking up in Groundhog Day. We continuously are here. We're continuously having these conversations. We're continuously talking about, the violence against the Black community, anti-Black bias, racism, and systemic racism. So what makes the conversation different this time around? What about this time makes the conversation different from before, if anything?
Social media. Social media, everything is now recorded. Everyone has their phones out. People take their phones out before they actually call the police. I think we are only in this spot now because word is able to travel faster than any time before in the entirety of the universe. On the flip side of that, being able to now use social media to spread this thing like a wildfire and how it can change. And Chris said he's a positive individual, and I've seen it starting to happen, at least in the baseball community, where I'm on a Zoom call with 200 white coaches. That would never happen 10 years ago. And unfortunately, no matter how many Black folks have died to police in wrongful shootings, that would never happen. But now, because social media, and thank goodness for Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all that stuff, we have an opportunity. That's my take on it. It's because it's now out there, and you can no longer say, "Oh, that never happened." No, it did happen. I watched the video.
I have to agree with Andre. I think it just allows you to mobilize people in a way that you just couldn't do as quickly before. And I also think it seems kind of strange, but we are in the middle of a pandemic as well. There's a lot of things happening. And in some ways, the pandemic has asked us to all kind of step back from the chaos of our day-to-day lives. And I think that that's actually helping to sustain the conversation because it's in front of people every day, and people are tuning into the news more often, and they are more linked in. They're even communicating with friends more often, I think. And so I think it's helping to sustain the conversation because we have fewer distractions right now. And I do think that there have been so many cases that have been so awful, but something about this particular case, the George Floyd murder, seems to have really struck a nerve in many more people. I think all of the cases are kind of equally unnerving, but something about this one really has broadened the impact on society in a way that so many more people are realizing that this really cannot continue, that our society cannot continue in the way that it has been, and that really enough is enough, and we have to figure out ways to change the system. And I think one of the things I've been trying to do in my little bit of Facebook activism is just to educate people that this is actually more than just police brutality, right? It's all of the ways in which Black bodies and Black minds are sort of undermined in our society, and that we have so many levels on which we need to change things. And I know that can seem really daunting. And so I think people have to sort of identify where their lane is. There are so many ways that we can affect change. And so we just have to identify a way in our work or in our personal lives or whatever the case may be that we can be part of the solution.
Yeah, I would have to agree with all of your points, Catherine, especially with, like, we are in the middle of this global pandemic, but what this has really helped with our movement is, like, this is exposing all of the systems that have been broken, were built to be broken and not work for Black people. And I mean, I think that's really important because, especially with social media and all of this access to get this content to more people, it's like, if you didn't feel this before, like, there's no excuse now. Like, you can see that it's not working for everyone. You can see that there are people who just simply are just dying because of these broken systems. And I mean, a lot of that is due to COVID. And like, like for that reason, it's just, this is the perfect storm. Like, I cannot say enough, like, we cannot lose this momentum, because we don't want this to just fizzle out. When will it happen again? It won't. It's political, it's in education, it's in the environment, it's in food and health and all of those systems, and it's all connected, and that has to be recognized. A lot of that was laid bare because of this pandemic, and I think that's important to realize. And the momentum simply cannot end. Like, it cannot stop here. This conversation can't be the end. It reaches so much, and the importance of this moment and this summer and the fall, it cannot be understated. And I think it cannot be understated. Yeah.
Thank you.
I was also wondering that if, I think that this is also a time in our country where people are now realizing also the hate that has been created over the last 4 years. And I think that also has something to do with the momentum and movement of understanding that, hey, we can no longer settle for what has taken place in our country. And as an American people, we need to really be binding together. I think that has, as far as the political aspect of it, as well as, November, we're going to be approaching an election. This is an important time in our country. And if we don't get it right now, when are we ever going to get it right? And so I agree with, what the others have said, but I also think that the political aspect of it and understanding that the hatred that has been created in our country right now is something that people are really taking seriously and taking a look at, and is like, we're no longer going to stand for this.
Yeah, the grotesqueness all around the polarization has been caused in this country. I agree, Candace. Is just, I mean, it's not like it hasn't been there, but it's like it has been, it's very prominent over the past 4 years. And so that actually leads us into, a totally different moment where people are actually starting to think deeper about this, right? And so we talk about voting, but the question is too, like, how do we, will that be the answer, right? Because it's just different players in the same system, a system that is based upon, found, like, our Constitution, which basically said as Black people that we were 3/5 of a person. So it wasn't even written for us. We weren't even considered people. So this is the same system we're upholding. So with those new players in, how do we hold them accountable? How do we still have some of those same conversations?
Well, I think that's where, Samantha's point comes in, of like really continuing the conversation, keeping that momentum going, continuously reminding people that this isn't a one and done. It's not like, hey, a George Floyd's death and then we're moving on. And I agree with Catherine, the pandemic has really allowed us to take pause. I mean, I know that I have watched the news much more than I would like to, but every time, they show that video, every time they show some other video, I'm almost disgusted about how, like, we're just hearing about this. When we think about, the Arbery case, how do we allow those things to take place? And that video was released, but it's now just getting to the public. Here we are in June, May, and this took place in February. So I think that, continues the conversation, and for us as a people, not allowing people to ever forget that this isn't just about now, this is for the duration.
Yeah, and the Ahmaud Arbery video did come out as soon as it happened. It just, I saw it as soon as it happened, but people circulated through it, and it wasn't until they brought that up along with the Breonna Taylor situation around, this isn't just one thing, right? This is a series of different things, and just even in the midst of everything, still more and more, brutality, more violence, more death. And so again, it goes back to what Samantha was saying and what you were just saying, what you all are saying, right? About like being in this moment, and how do we keep focusing to this moment so that we can make effective systemic change, right? Because you can, it could be, all the diversity in the world. You could have all the diversity trainings in the world, diversity, equity, access. You could have all the right people at the table. But if you're still operating within the same system, you're going to get the same results. And I know that sounds sad because we made a lot of progress in terms of access and equity and bringing the right folk to the table, but we're still upholding the same system. So we got to change. We got to make systems change.
I would also add, like what everybody's been saying, the fact that COVID was going on, I think it was powerful. You turn on the TV, you go on social media, and you see your family and friends in your own community, risking their health and safety in the middle of a pandemic where hundreds of thousands of people are passing away, united over this one cause. That's substantial. And it should show you something. And not only is it occurring in your own community, now it's happening internationally in countries where, the issues may not be as severe as they are in the United States. That showing of solidarity, I think it made it clear to everybody that, look, it's not going away. It's going to be here for a while. And the fact of the matter is you have to confront this reality. You have to confront some truths here. It's not the time to be neutral. Like, I think we go to Swarthmore, it's a pretty liberal institution, and some people, they might hold their tongue. Like, I think it's readily apparent at this point that neutrality is, you're making your decision by being quiet.
Yeah, so, Audre Lorde's "Your silence will not protect you." That's what it
right, exactly. And I texted, I was up late after, the night where Donald Trump said, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. Because as a Black man, that really shook me. And I was on the phone with a bunch of my friends up till 3, 4 in the morning. And I texted my team and I said, look, it's time for all of us to consider and then reconsider where we stand on this and how you're contributing to a certain side. It's not the time to be meek. So yeah, I would agree with everybody.
I just want to jump in quick, just to throw out maybe, you guys all covered really good points and everything. I agree with a lot of it. And I feel that, just to touch on something that I feel that we didn't really speak on is with social media. I feel that it's given people a place to almost hide, but also show their ugliness at the same time. And I think that that's what's hitting home for a lot of people too, because they're finding out that someone who they thought would, be on their side or have your back or support you wouldn't have your back and support you. And I think that, social media, it kind of gives people, a place to hide and be ignorant and be, have hate speech and things like that. And I think that that's another reason why it's hitting home for so many people this time around. Because I remember, with all the other cases, the Ferguson riots and some of the riots that happened, I think the Eric Gardner one and things like that, I don't remember seeing any much like an abundance of people saying derogatory terms about Black people on the internet then. But this time around, for some reason, it's a lot worse. And I think that that's why a lot of people, I think that's maybe the difference this time around too, is that people are really showing their true colors. And I guess that's what happens when, things are under pressure, and maybe some people might be fearing that they might be losing some of their power or some of their privilege, or being comfortable in their environment, that things might actually change. And that, we're all staying positive and hoping things do change, and that we do continue forward with the steps we're taking. And another thing that I think that is also different this time around, I went to a couple of protests, and I just seen a very diverse, very diverse variety of people there, old, young, all different, shades and colors and cultures there. So I feel like that's, I feel like the support is like a very high level, and at a very high level right now too, which is why we have to, or we can't let go of this momentum. I feel that that's making things stronger. So in a nutshell, I think that social media definitely has spread things, and I also think that it's for me personally, and like with Chris and Tobin, with the guns being pointed at you and things like that, it's very traumatic, and it brings back, seeing someone die like that, or whatever the case was. It hits home for you, and I think that they like the oppressor, and just with social media, I feel that it's almost just like another modern day lynching. You see pictures of blacks and Africans being lynched, and then before the internet, I think that with police brutality, whenever a black man was killed unjustly or whatever happened, it was always on the front page of the newspaper, or it was such a big story in the newspaper. So I feel like we're being poked fun at the same time with these videos, and how things spread so fast, because there's not I'm not seeing videos or clips or pictures of other races or people being bullied or mistreated. It's always someone of color, and I feel like that's also why it hits home, because I feel like they're poking fun at us, at our death and our culture, and our people we look up to, our public figures, all of the most important people. I feel like they're poking fun at us. So that's, I think that's, that's not new, but I feel like social media makes it worse, and it makes it harder that way, because now it's on video. It's not just pictures, and it's just not text that you read. You're actually watching someone who has a family lose their life.
I think it's really explicit, actually, right? Like, I think the points that you bring up are, this mirroring of this is the modern day lynching. And certainly then, like, I know I've seen people post on social media, they had postcards that had sort of like cartoon versions of Black bodies being lynched, right? So they absolutely poked fun at it. It wasn't just that the real lynching was on the front page, but they were turning this into, like, characterizing this and turning it into these little cartoon postcards that you send to I don't know who, but that's what they did. And we're having the same thing now, right? Like, there have been pictures taken of people pretending to kneel on each other's necks and taunting protesters in that way.
It started with a wrestling coach. The wrestling coach is the first one who posted their picture.
Yeah, and so it's not even, this isn't even like that they're trying to hide it, right? They're not trying to hide it at all. They're absolutely poking fun at somebody losing their life, and how we could ever, be okay with that as a country. I won't understand, but I'll do everything I can to try to change that. But that sort of lack of respect for human life is just, it shouldn't have a place in America, land of the free, home of the brave. Like, it shouldn't have a place in this country. And so we have to change that, and we have to be able to call that out. And I think, as people have said, if you're silent about things like that, then you're just as complicit in the behavior.
Yeah, what you just said, Catherine, and what Kwane said, and then it also goes back to sort of what Candace said. I was thinking about, like, how social media came in, and how, and I think even Samantha described it as the perfect storm, and thinking about, like, okay, so what led us up to this moment? And I think about just the polarization that has sort of been drummed up by this administration, the past 4 years. And then what happened, which was very interesting, is we had the Amy Cooper moment, right? Bird watcher in Central Park. She weaponizes the police and calls the police. And then, maybe a few days later, we have George Floyd, 8 minutes and 46 seconds, right? And he's gone. And those Amy Cooper moments actually result in George Floyd, moments, right? And really thinking about how that polarization helps to drum some of that up and write that narrative. And it wasn't lost on me when Kwane and both Catherine, you're talking about, like, the poke and fun, but the trauma, right? The trauma and the re-traumatization. And we talked about the attacks on our mind, and watching that over and over again, and seeing those images over and over again. And it's what it is. And the reason why they sent out those postcards is because it was terrorism, right? Because it was really Black folk outnumbered, at that particular point in time. And it's really terrorism. It's really to scare you and put you in your place, change your way of life, take away your freedom. And so that is something that I think about all the time is showing that to your kids, seeing that on a day-to-day basis, all those things. That leads me to the next question, which is doing our work, right? We always talk about so we're saying we've had these conversations before. We're going to continue to build on these conversations, but now it's time to act, right? Because we can have the endless good conversations, but how are we going to act on this? And what does it mean when we ask our colleagues to come forward to support us to do our work, right? Because with all of this trauma, and I could just go on, it's exhausting, right? I mean, I have emotional stamina, but we only have so much emotional stamina, right? And we're not the only ones that are supposed to be doing the work. Some of it's a part of our job, so we are actually doing the work. But what would, it goes back to sort of the original question, what would you have wanted to see in growing up or right now in your experiences as a student athlete, or as a coach, getting support from administration? What would support look like to you? And what would you like to see when you're telling people to go do your work? What does it mean for Swarthmore athletics to do their work in this area?
Well, I'll start there. For me in administration is getting a vision, which I think we will have, and I think Adam has done some work and continue to do work to get us a vision going forward as how do we bridge this gap, and how do we attack this full steam as a department, and some just individual examples for me would be some sort of mentorship program. We are very close in community to Black students within Chester, Black students in Philadelphia, but not just saying it, but actually doing some work. So again, being an athletic body, we need to bring in some sort of camps, clinics, something to engage their mind. But before we can address the camps and clinics and do those things, we need to make sure that they have the transportation to get there. All right. And then we have to win the community to make sure that, we're not just somebody that's going to be fly by night, go in 1 week and not come back ever again, but be something that's going to be sustainable. And then also just, build those relationships within that community, because I think sport is a way to bring everyone together. I think it's a great unifier, but we have to be and do the work and understand that just having a clinic, putting it online is not doing the work. You have to go get the people to come, but by getting the people, you have to go and win them with your by caring, really. And then meeting their needs, whether that be transportation, whether that be providing a lunch during their camp, whether that make sure they get home, and maybe that's around transportation. But that's something I think that not just hosting a camp is just not enough, and to understand that that's the way that we're going to build some diversity within our programs as well. Like, you're not recruiting the prospect that you're going to you're recruiting, or you're training the prospect for the next coach. All right. So it's not about you just training this prospect for your team today, but do the work for someone after you, because that's the way we're going to be able to build and get kids, like Catherine said, who don't typically play softball. All right. Or baseball. That's how we get them to enjoy and love that sport. But we have to do the work by getting them to the camps and clinics and things that I can see that help build that community.
I had a quick question. So say we, build this group of folk who eventually will come to the college, or, be a part of Swarthmore athletics or go to another higher education institution. Do you think that as an institution, we're ready to receive them? So when they come, they actually will thrive when they get here. Are we ready? Are we ready to, have we created that environment for the students to come in and feel like,
Yes.
They would have success. Yeah.
It's funny because as Tobin was talking, my mind went to how do we prepare our student athletes for that community engagement, right? Because being a predominantly white institution, and I do think that, like Abbas was saying, if you're mute, then you are choosing your side. And I feel like no matter how you slice the cake, some student athletes still don't understand the power of being mute. And they, because of the way they're raised, the backgrounds that they come from, they just don't really know which way to go. And I think it's important for us as administrators and coaches to prepare our student athletes for that community engagement. I think that once we begin to prepare our student athletes for that community engagement, then our community can be more accepting of those. Because, when we talk about privilege, we're talking about engaging with students that don't have privilege and meeting them where they are. So we need to be mindful of what that looks like and be ready for that before we go out into community. And so, for me, when we talk about the work, I think that, like you said, Shay, you can do all of the, diversity and inclusive training that you want to, but I think that it needs to start with that kind of training and on a consistent basis. We do drug and alcohol, we do, sexual assault, but we as a athletics community, and granted, this is just my take on it from, my previous institution and just the year I've been in here. I don't know that at all did we have any diversity or inclusive training. But if that is something that is of utmost importance that we can implement on a consistent basis, more and more student athletes will be having these conversations amongst each other, and they will be prepared for that community engagement so that those students that come into campus that might not be, they're, like Tobin grew up in Chester, he all Black community, like those students that are going to be coming to Swarthmore and are prepared for what they're going to experience there. I think that that's the start of it. There's so many more aspects that we need to continue to move forward to really move in the right direction. But I think that if we can start with the training of our student athletes and our coaches to really get them to understand that, hey, this is what it means to be, socially just. This is what it means to not be racist. I always love the concept of when people say, yeah, well, I got Black friends. That don't not make you racist, and so really understanding what it is to, be not racist and really understand, to have an understanding of differences and different people. I think that that would be the start of really preparing us as an athletics department for the next steps as we move forward.
Thank you, Candace.
Coach, I couldn't.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Coach. The concept of integrating like race work and race education into the very fabric of your team. Like there are Black individuals on a lot of programs. I don't know the exact numbers, but on a lot of programs. And for us, these are not just issues that we like to talk about and debate because it's fun. Like it's a matter of survival. Like we're talking about with Chris. Like it's a matter of survival for a lot of people. So you got to understand that this work is really important at that point. And so, and having conversations with my team, having conversations with my coach, like we're implementing a structure where, look, we're going to have mandatory readings that are going to help people unlearn certain bad biases, and that are going to, help you learn about these structures. I think every team needs to do that. It has to be part of the work as a team. Like that is part of being a team. Is understanding those experiences and being proactive about helping. I would also add, like, for me playing basketball, obviously basketball runs into just a lot of Black people. It's dominated by Black people. If you play AAU is like the amateur youth league. for lack of a better description. And a lot of people, yeah, Coach Brown's laughing at me. It wasn't a great description, but yeah, that's like what you do as a young basketball player. You go to these tournaments, and it's honestly beautiful. It's loud, it's boisterous, and people happy. It's a lot of Black faces. And as I got older, as I started, maybe considering playing basketball in college, maybe not at the D1 level, but maybe at a D3 level, I started going to these camps. They call them elite camps or academic elite camps. And all of a sudden the faces are a lot whiter. And now I'm, going up to other Black kids like, yo, what's up? Like, because those are the only faces that look like me. That in and of itself should tell you that it's systemic. As I go up and as it becomes more elite, or as, you gain access to, the potential to go to a school or an elite institution like Swarthmore, or these NESCAC schools or other schools in the Centennial, the faces become a lot whiter, and there are less people who look like you. So I think actively Swarthmore has to look how, like, we're doing diversity work, but we got to go find these kids, because it's not like they're just not smart enough, or they're just, falling through the cracks by their own doing. It has to be active. So.
Yeah, I think to build off of a lot of that, it's like the Black, and I'm gonna be real, the Black individuals, especially student athletes at Swarthmore, you guys are educated, highly educated, you speak very professional. So we also have to make sure that we educate our student athletes on, well, what about the Black guy you see with tattoos on, wearing a wife beater and playing his music loud, pulling up to the ballpark? Because guess what? If I'm excited to go to the ballpark one day, that might be me, because I've got tattoos going down my arms. And you might not know that I'm a baseball coach. And say if one day I want to sag my pants, which I don't, but say if I did sag my pants, like, it's that stereotype that we have to make sure that we educate our student athlete and our youth around, because like you go to Swarthmore, I can tell you go to Swarthmore just from how you talk, just from how you talk. And that's a good thing, but let's be real, in today's world, like, everyone doesn't have a chance to even go to college. Like, that's just the reality of it. So we have to make sure that we educate our student athletes, like, just because they're Black and they might not sound like the Black person that you went to school with at Swarthmore, doesn't mean they're a bad person, doesn't mean that they're a hoodlum. For example, same thing, just because they're Black and they have committed crimes in the past and they are now set free, allowed to get out and work, does not mean that they're a bad person. The barber that I go to in Philly has done time in prison. He has a face tattoo and he owns his own barbershop. What makes him different than a white felon? It's no different. You've done your time, God has given you forgiveness, and you're able to live your life. And that's what we've seen in all of these shootings. Oh, we look back on the history and it kind of checks a box as far as why he was able to be killed. And that's kind of where we need to have like that tougher conversation and it's like Coach Candace said, well, I have Black friends. Yeah, like, I'm Dre and I'm a nice guy and I smile a lot. So of course you're going to always lean on, well, Dre's my friend. But what if you saw Dre pulling up to the ballpark, playing music loud with tattoos? Can we not stereotype that guy? And that's where I think we need to have those conversations with our student athletes.
Yeah, I think that there's been a lot of conversations about how people exceptionalize folk, and I'm teaching this workshop right now on dismantling anti-Black bias and racism, and it's interesting. I put up this slide about the racism scale and about how we talk a little bit about respectability politics, and we've had like some intra-community conversations about that too, right? I've seen like different things posted and people talking about that, and then you also hear people talk about people's histories, and everything like that. And I remember, my brothers and them saying like, I wonder what pictures they would like if I did something wrong, or if I ended up dying, what picture would they use? Like, what actual picture would they go find on my Facebook page to put up to try to depict what it is that they wanted, the story or the narrative they sort of wanted to tell about me. And so, like, you know, we've also in some of these conversations had discussions about like intellectual elitism and how that plays out in all of these different things. But at the end of the day, all I can think about is you know, my partner, his degree is in computational neuroscience. He graduated and played football for the Air Force Academy. He's a 6'4" Black man. And when they pulled us over in Oklahoma, they put him directly in the car. They didn't ask him about his degrees, and they didn't talk to him about the fact that he got a perfect score on his GRE verbal. They didn't ask those questions. They put him in a car. That's what they did, without even asking for his license. Took him out, put him right in the car, and he made it home for another day. So that's the stuff that we have to talk about, right? They don't ask those questions. When they see you, they don't see you. Right? Is that Ralph Ellison quote, right? I'm invisible because they refuse to see me. That's the issue, to truly see you. And so that makes me think a little bit about, so change cannot, you know, there's going to be people, there's students, right? And there's a couple students on this call where, and then also colleagues and maybe even yourself, where change cannot come fast enough, right? Right. And so that there's going to be some unrest because change can't come fast enough. And then there's also folk who aren't going to agree with the changes that you're making and the fact that, hey, we might be changing a little bit too fast. Take it slow. I'm sure you've heard that before too, right? And so what do we do about that, right? What do we do about the folk where, you know, that push and pull, that change can't come fast enough? This is the methodology we want to use towards change. You know, it could be, I went back and read some of the old kneeling articles when Leilosa and Emma Morgan Bennett did, you know, they kneeled at the game, like right after Trump got elected, right around then. And then they went to Rowan, and Rowan wouldn't allow them to come in and actually kneel at the game. They had to go outside. They couldn't even come into the gym. Like, as administrators, what do we do to support those students? Do we go play at a college where they say they can't even come into the gym to exercise their First Amendment rights, you know? Or do we, and if you have people who are like, I feel like I'm being violated because they're standing up for their rights, how do we have conversations with them? I'm interested in what your thoughts are.
It's funny you brought them up because I've been with them since their freshman year, and I actually remember that game, and even in the tournament, I forgot what university it was, but they got booed in the NCAA tournament. I think it was the first round, and I honestly I was shocked that you have these parents and relatives, friends, family, whatever, at this event booing these kids. Like, I couldn't believe it, and I was shocked and surprised. And they kneeled, and I was right there with them. I didn't stand. I was right there because I support what they do, and I feel like as a coach, as an administrator, you should support what your students do. And I was happy that they swept that team in straight sets and sent them home packing. So that was special for me. To go off what you said before, you got to have the conversation. Like, if you have an idea, you have to speak up and say it. I feel like having the conversation is the important part, because if you don't say anything, then no one's going to know how you feel or which way to go. We'll always have ideas and go in a direction, but if you don't have your opinion, there's no way to figure out which way or how you're feeling. And I think it's important for the students to step up and speak up how they want our department to go, because they have a voice, and it's your experience too, as well as your coaches. And it's important for our student athletes to speak up and give your suggestions. Don't be afraid. If one coach is not in agreement with you, there's a professor, there's another coach, like there's so many people you could go to, and believe me, somebody's gonna step up and speak for you.
I would also say too, to folks who say, why are you moving so fast? Is how is this fast? This is 400 years worth of oppression, right? So this is not fast. Actually, this is slow. We just got some momentum right now. And if you're not with us, then it's evident that you are against us. And to be frankly, like we want to move forward with everybody, right? But if you're not in support of something that's bigger than you, because you have to remove the you out of it first, in my opinion, and think bigger than yourself, because you're not going to be able to understand the pain of someone else if you don't understand their history, right? So you have to be able to understand the history and know that this is something that just didn't happen overnight, right? My ancestors have been beat, right, for freedom that we don't have yet. The same liberties that we were promised that we don't have yet. So I think you have to understand that history to know that, look, this is not something that we just overnight just thought of. This is something that has been building. And I think now we have a generation of people who now understand somewhat of that and are just pushing forward, which I want to be a part of. And I feel like if you don't want to be a part of that, then you have some questions I think that you need to answer within yourself.
Thank you, Tobin.
Yeah, I think I would just like kind of building off of what's been said. We're in life or death situations, right? Every day. And so every day we wait is the potential loss of another life. And so there has to be urgency. Loss of a life because of adverse medical outcomes, right, that disproportionately affect people of color. Loss of a life because of police brutality or just incarceration rates that disproportionately affect people of color. One day could be too long, right? It could mean the loss of another life. And so there has to be urgency at this point. And of course, as Tobin said, this isn't new. In some of the spheres that I'm in academia, as a STEM professional, I am a very small fraction of people in the United States who are Black, a female, and hold a PhD in chemistry. And there's been a lot of conversation about that in our different academic circles lately. And some people have even said, well, we should really just look at how far we've changed over the past 50 years. Because, you know, if we were making progress over the 50 years since we've like integrated education and things like that and made college education accessible, then we're doing okay. But we're not. We're fundamentally not. Only 4.5% of the people in this country who hold a PhD are Black, men and women. And that does not represent our population. And we shouldn't have to wait 50 years or another 50 years to start to get closer to equal representation. There's no reason why we can't be doing things today to change the system. There's no reason why people who are hiring faculty right now, right? We're making colleges all over making decisions about hiring replacements and things like that. There's no reason why they can't make the hiring intentional so that it's including people of color and not excluding people of color because, oh, maybe they didn't go to an Ivy League institution. That's not only one marker potentially of success. And there's a lot of, you know, issues with using that even as a marker of success. And so there are things that can be done today to start to change it for tomorrow. And there are things that can be done today to change it for 10 years, 50 years down the road. And we need to be doing all of those things.
Thank you, Catherine. I don't know if anybody else wanted to weigh in before I move to our next question. Good. Okay, so my next question is we talk about systemic racism or institutionalized racism often, and when it comes to eradicating systemic racism, how can we dismantle, disrupt, and eradicate a system that many benefit from and are complicit in? How will we continue to have the will, the resolve, and the energy we have in this moment now? And when we hit a wall, not if, because we know we will, as a community, how will we keep going? And we talked a little bit about this, but I would like to spend a little more time on that.
I can speak on this. I think we've kind of already mentioned this in some of the changes we'd like to see, specifically with like ID clinics and how we're getting more Black folks and POC involved in our recruitments. And like, luckily our athletics department, it's pretty autonomous in a lot of the power and abilities and like changes we can make. And like in doing so, there are a lot of changes we can make quickly. And because of how small the department is and like the different funding and all of those things. So I think in an institution like this, there are a lot of factors, like I said, with recruiting, the camps, who has access to visit the college, and all of those things, making those more accessible. How are we distributing funds to make it accessible? And who are we making it accessible to? Like, those are a lot of things that, like, if we're intentional with them, like that in itself goes against what this institution was meant to do, or like who it was meant to work for. So if we're more intentional with that, I think a lot of those changes with like funding, who coaches are looking at, where coaches are going to recruit, like a lot of that could create really good changes very quickly. And in terms of like hitting a wall, I mean, just in our stamina and everything happening now, like I'm sure everyone here has kind of felt that it's tired. Like just it's tiring to hear and see and be in the midst of a lot of this. And if we want to continue going forwards, and in athletics, how will we keep going? Like making some type of timeline, like what are our goals? Like that needs to be articulated very clearly, or else this will all just be watered down and we won't meet them, and we'll be having another conversation like this next year with not much completed or none of our goals met. And I think like we need to make those goals very clear and like written out. Like what is that? We that needs to be like, everyone needs to be made aware. That needs to be something people are agreeing on. And I think that's one way it'll keep pushing us forwards, because we'll have something to go towards.
One of the things that I would like to ask is if there's anybody else that wanted to talk a little bit more about how do we dismantle a system that many people benefit from and that we're complicit in, and that, it couldn't just be us, but just that folk are complicit in. And I really feel like I'm doing, again, I'm going back to the anti-Black bias and racism series that I'm leading right now. And I mean, that's how we start off tomorrow's session, is really asking people like, you stepped up and you said you wanted to do this work. So we talked about the work that we're going to do in athletics, right? You stepped up and said that you wanted to do this work. Well, I mean, just how committed are you, right? Because we are aware, we have to be critically conscious of the fact that this is a system that we benefit from and are complicit in certain ways, right? And so how do we, if you have colleagues who hit that wall where they're like, oh, hold up a minute, because, there's certain communities where it's like, I'm down for the cause, but not in my backyard, right? Like if that means that, so the next question is like, what do I have to sacrifice for us to be successful in this area? And people get really worried. They're okay as long as they don't have to be uncomfortable. There's no discomfort. They're okay as long as they don't have to make any sacrifices. So really thinking about what those sacrifices are. And then I'll ask you to sort of combine this with the final question. That basically, in closing, what is your 140 character tweet on how Swarthmore athletics can inspire change regarding racial justice within the college, nationally and globally? Because at the end of your United Against Racial Justice statement, it ends with, we will inspire change. So how are you going to do that, right? How are you going to do that? Knowing that there are folk that actually benefit from this system, knowing that folk that, consistently over history, we're going to change, but just enough so you'll be quiet. We're going to change, but just enough. We're going to put this Band-Aid over this festering sore, and hopefully nothing oozes out. I feel like I bandaged it right? But it doesn't have a chance to heal. So how are you going to inspire true effective change? How's that going to happen? And it's hard because I will be upfront with you, and y'all are watching this video, so it's interesting having this conversation. I think this conversation needs to be happening between folk who identify as Black. We're doing this work. We continue to do this work. We don't have any choice but to do this work. That's the only way we can survive. I want to have a conversation with the folk who can choose and has a luxury to figure out, if they want, whenever they want to enter into the work, they enter into it. They get tired, they walk away. If it gets too hard, they have the conflict, all the arguments, they can step away. They have the luxury of stepping away. We don't have the luxury to step away from that work. So it's hard for me to get you all to answer this question for somebody else. That's why I keep asking you, like, what does support look like in this particular area? Like, how would you inspire change? But also, how would your support systems inspire change in these particular situations? So that was a long way for me to answer this question, but I just honestly want to be upfront with the folk that we're having this conversation, but I know people will be watching it. And, there's something about how this conversation is framed that we have to be mindful of.
That was so real, and you did a great job explaining that question. You needed to, and I'm sitting here thinking about, I'm like, well, how can I put this into words? And I go back to you have to find examples. In order, this is crazy, because in order for them to kind of level with us, you have to tell them, okay, think about a time where life was unfair for you. And I go back to the spring. We're in Florida. COVID hits. They got to cancel the season. We got to go back home. Unfair, adversity, right? The first thing everybody does, oh, we got to email the president. We got to do this. We can do something. We got to email. We have power. And I'm sitting there on the bus like, hey, this is uncontrollable. This is God. Like, we can't control this, right? And I'm sitting there like, let's just go home. And I'm like, man, what if we had that approach for racism? Something that we actually can control, something that our voice can be heard with, and can go a long way, not just while at Swarthmore, but when we graduate and become CEOs and entrepreneurs and start hiring folks that look like us. If we can get white folks and people who don't look like us to think about a time when life was unfair and you said, I can make change right now. Think about that, because like you just said, like, we can't walk away from this. Right. So if you kind of look at that example and say, man, if we can stand up for racism, what's going on right now in the country, like we did for COVID-19, come on, we got it in us. We just got to do it when it is tough and difficult. So
I'm so glad you said that, Andre, because I was sitting on a panel for, and I think I told some of these the people on the call this yesterday. I was sitting on working with some other folk across higher ed, and they were talking about like we know we got the capacity. We've had committee on committee on committee, continuity committees, the subcommittee for this committee, everything to try to work this stuff out for COVID. Everybody's talking to everybody twice. If we know we have the capacity to do that for systemic racism and institutionalized racism, we know we do. And a matter of fact, we're trying to use actually COVID right now to get us so that we can as soon as we get this COVID thing worked out in 2031, we'll get back to you, right? Well, when the time has passed and maybe you're a little calmer, right? But they're not talking about the fact that do you have the will? The question is do you have the will? Right? You have the capacity. I see it. You are shining, right? You can do it. But do you have the will to do it? And that is the question that we're asking all across the country, not just at Swarthmore, right? Do you have the will to do it? Right? And how are you demonstrating that? I want to see it demonstrated. I want to see how this is happening. And so I'm going to let everybody else talk about what inspires, what change you're going to inspire.
Well, one thing I would say is you got to be willing to lose friends, like lose people that who don't believe what is right, and be able to just like be comfortable with that, right? So to be uncomfortable, you got to be comfortable with losing people who that you thought were, supporting you, but really they're not supporting you. So you got to be able to cut bait with that. And I think, to me, really, it comes down to an economic thing too. I think you got to be able to understand that, you need to be able to, if you are privileged enough to have influence, you need to use your influence to help someone that you're supporting. And a lot of the times it's financial, because a lot of decisions are made on economics. And I mean, I think for the Black Lives Matter movement, in many movements that we are a part of, it comes down to we need a seat at the table, but in order to get that power, it comes to economics. So we need everyone's funding to be able to help push our agendas forward. And you got to be able to, like I said, lose friends, lose what you call friends, to be able to really make that commitment to what matters, and to know that I think for us to put in a sports realm, like when you do get tired, right, you got to be able to tag team someone else on within your community or your support group to say, I need some encouragement, I need some help, right? I need, and be able to have that conversation with somebody that doesn't look like you, right? I need help. I need your support. This is what I need you to do. I mean, I think that's important. I don't have all the answers to how we get there. I think that's why we're here to talk about it. But I think we got to be able to have the conversation and to know that, folks who have power and influence have to be uncomfortable, and they have to be able to cut bait with some people who might not agree with the decision that they make, but to know that it's for the good of our progression.
I would agree with what Toby just said. It comes down to a certain point where if you can't agree to the humanity of Black people after seeing George Floyd be murdered like that, and after seeing Ahmaud Arbery get killed, and after hearing about Breonna Taylor's murder, if you can't agree with our humanity, then you might be too far gone for us to change your mind. That being said, what we can do and what's been going on is to make it so inconvenient for you to hold those views and those positions. And we're in the athletic department, so the Drew Brees example is pretty apt, I think. He came out and made those ignorant statements and was condemned to, by everybody. It has to be that you shouldn't be able to go about your daily life and your daily business harboring these views and expressing these views. It has to be super inconvenient for you to be a racist at this time. And so for the people who are too far gone, we're just going to have to hit them with the same force with Drew Brees and so many other people who express ignorant views. And we see Drew Brees came back and apologized and is now, acting in like he's an advocate. So I think for me, it's the biggest thing. There are certain people that you're going to, who are with you. We can change your mind. And we're going to work with you and educate you on that front. But on the other hand, if you're too far gone for us, we just have to make your life miserable for feeling that way. And it's that important. I don't know how else to say it. It sounds blunt, but it's that serious. So that would be my synopsis of the entire issue.
Yeah, I think keeping this in the realm of athletics for us, I mean, as athletes, former athletes, whatever familiarity we have, we know loss, we know victory, we know pain, we know fatigue. As a sports team or as an athlete, you're fighting tooth and nail for the person next to you for victory. And I mean, that's what we're fighting for. It's victory. We haven't had it. It's 400 years in the making, and we're still fighting. And who are you to stand to the side and watch us as our teammates or as someone involved with athletics with us, or even just part of the Swarthmore community? Who are you to stand to the side while we're fighting literally for our lives? And I mean, that's what this is.
Yeah, I was thinking kind of along the same lines as Samantha, kind of the last thought that she finished up there, that what I've really focused my efforts on over the past month, 6 weeks, are the people who are traditionally silent, because we really need their voices to sustain this conversation and to make change so that we can have sort of a critical mass to make change. I agree with what Abbas said, that there are some people that are, a little too far gone. And it's just not a good use of our energy, right? Because as we've alluded to, this is tiring work. And so we need to put our energies towards those who we think are in a place of power and are willing to use that power to affect change. You know, like I said, I've been posting a lot of things on social media. And so I've had a lot of really productive one-on-one conversations. I've had some unproductive. A former Swarthmore student actually who reached out to me and said, you know, I really appreciated your post, even as I've, you know, agreed and sometimes disagreed with them. And I was like, well, my posts are all my lived experience. So there's actually nothing for you to agree or disagree with. This is just fact, right? And so those are really hard conversations. And that's probably, you know, a Swarthmore student I'm not going to look up at an alumni reunion necessarily because he's a little too far gone. He really just couldn't. I spent some time with him. We did a back and forth, but I couldn't really get anywhere in that conversation. But for every conversation I've had like that, the thing that I think that does feel different about this movement, I probably had 5 that really have led to some sort of productivity. And so I think having those one-on-one conversations is really important. So if I were to think of the tweet, because I know you asked for a tweet, it would be something like team, college, you know, community, world, or country, really. So like we would start conversations within our team. I think some of the athletes have really mentioned that maybe the team needs to read a book. Maybe we need to have the whole department read a particular set of books and have discussions within the team or across teams, right? And then we as a department can think of what are some ways that we can affect change in our college community and in the communities that neighbor us. And I think in doing that, if we can find ways to sustain it, and one thing I'll make a little plug for everybody who's going to listen to this, Swarthmore tends to put their money quite literally where their mouth is. And we now have an endowed fund for people to go affect change as it relates to social justice and in particular racial justice in this country. And so let's use that to start doing the work. And if we can sustain programming, I think we become a model for other colleges within the Centennial Conference, for other conferences within the country, for the Division II, Division I levels. We push people to do better by doing better first and foremost on our campus, within our teams, and within our local community.
Yeah, you know, something I was thinking about is, as far as the work is concerned, I think for me, what I would like to see done at the highest level, as far as athletics is concerned, all the way down, you know, to our support staff, is that we all take an intrinsic look into where our thought process is and how because I don't know that you can affect change if you don't really have that intrinsic look to really be like, okay, here's where I stand. You know, I think it starts with that look, and then you have the opportunity to really move. And, you know, everyone in some form or fashion has biases, and, you know, they have some type of like baggage they need to deal with. And I think it's important that we deal with that baggage in order to be impactful and be able to move this movement in the right direction. Because I think you will always be stuck if you don't take that intrinsic look. And I think that once we, you know, have the opportunity to really take that intrinsic look and say, as a people, you know, like whether you're Black, whether you're white, here's how I can affect change, and then really utilizing your voice. You know, for me personally, all of my white friends, what I have said is don't stand for, you know, sitting around and, you know, allowing racism and microaggressions to take place without you saying something about them. You know, like if you truly feel like, hey, you're for me, you support me, right? When someone says something in your locker room, don't let that kid get away with it. If someone says something at your dinner table, don't let your parents say that, oh yeah, you know, and like back to Tobin's point, yeah, you might lose some friends, you may lose some family members, but as a collective unit, if we truly want to be a unified America and move in the right direction, we all have to utilize our voice. And I think if we really exercise that, when we get tired, there's going to be someone there to pick you up. And I think that as a athletics program, we need to really be mindful and take that intrinsic look and then really utilize our voices and don't allow people to get away with being racist and microaggressions as we have in the past.
I appreciate that. Did anybody else want to lift something up?
I just wanted to follow up quickly on a point that Candace made, and I think it ties also with something that Andre said earlier, that I think we also need to give people space to change and to accept them once they have changed. So this idea of you may have made mistakes in the past, but as you come to a new understanding and have done the work on yourself, that we can accept that change that a person has done, right? So that where a person is today isn't necessarily where they're going to be 5 and 10 years from now. And so we need to make room for people as they are working to grow, because there are some people who are really trying to put in the good work to change within themselves. And so we need to give space for that as well.
Yeah, if you think about the hashtag be generous with each other, right? And really creating that foundation and scaffolding to fail forward. It goes back to what Kwane was saying about, you pronounce my name, and you get it wrong once, or twice, you're trying to figure it out, that's fine. But every time, and then you're asking me for, a shortened version of that and all of those different things, like that is, that's not how we grow. That's not how we stretch ourselves. That's not how we move past what I also like to call our learning edges. And so I do appreciate what you lifted up about the fact that we're gonna make mistakes, right? I always say every day I insert my foot in my mouth. Every day, I'm learning, and I would hate it if I was, I had to use canceled, or I would hate it if I was in a situation where I didn't get a chance to come back from that, and to continue to be in community because, I was just trying to learn. Was there any parting words before we sign off?
I had one thing that I did want to say,
About this?
just like mentioned, just being a Black male athlete. I want to say, like, the movement is not like all the same thing. Being a Black male athlete, a lot of the things that in our culture and our media, a lot of things that are attached to Black male athletes, there are a lot of negative stereotypes, but there's also a lot of things that are perceived as cool or hip. And there are people, Black women, and other intersectionalities who are struggling a lot worse than we are while we're struggling. And so recognizing our role and perhaps making that hurt worse and rectifying that and doing the work that we're asking other people to do is also important as Black men, I would say, to everybody in this chat. So I just think that's super important in the wake of Breonna Taylor and Oluwatoyin, Silo, like
Tony McDade, all of that, definitely. Yeah.
Well, like.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that.
I just want to say to our student athletes on here, like, thank you. Like, obviously it's tough for everyone, but like, it's hard to lead your peers. It really is, especially with this situation. Like, and I remember being in your shoes and just know, like, and fortunate, like at school like Swarthmore, where you got some administration that looked like you, but just know that you guys, I look up to you guys. Like, even though I'm 30 years old, like I look up to you guys because one day when I have kids, like I want them to be able to speak up the way you guys do about racism and things that should be considered equality and right in this country. So thank you guys for what you're doing.
Sure. Thank y'all for listening to us. And
yeah, thank you for having this.
And I want you to know, from an administrator standpoint, you have full support here, and I'm sure your coaches as well as other coaches. But I want you to know personally, for myself and administration, if there's a problem, issue that you have, that you don't feel comfortable going to your coach with, my door is open. My email is always open. We keep things confidential, and we'll go about it the right way, but we will make change happen.
Appreciate that, Toby.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
You guys already know I always look out for you guys. I'm with you 24/7, much as I love hate seeing it all the time. But you guys already know I'll run through a brick wall for you just like you do for me every day.
Yeah, and if there's any issues up on the hill, I'm always here in the Science Center. That's where I am today. So I don't leave this place. So if you ever need me here on campus, just swing by.
Same for me. I just want to say I appreciate everyone for leading by example and using your voice. We're using our voice as a collective, so let's keep pressing with all this momentum we have, and hopefully we can set up another roundtable soon. I definitely want to chime in and update with everyone hopefully soon, and even back when school starts, I think we should continue this and try to do it in person too. We can probably keep coming up with more great ideas, and that's what I think sets everything in motion. So thank you everyone for leading by example here.
Awesome. Yeah, so Abbas and Samantha, I just want to make you guys aware that I am going to head the committee on change. And so I think that student input is really important. And so during this Zoom session, I definitely took some notes in the sense of thinking about that timeline and being transparent in the communication, because I think that it's important that we continue this conversation. And so, if you guys have any ideas or, want to be, involved in a conversation, and we'll definitely, be involving the Athlete Diversity and Inclusion Committee in those conversations as we continue to move forward. Because, I think that this is important work and it doesn't stop here. We need to continue this. And as you guys have expressed, I want to see this as an ongoing thing so that we can continue to educate our peers and educate ourselves to be the best representation of Swarthmore athletics that we possibly can be.
Okay, well, I thank you for your time. You've been quite generous with your time, and I look forward to future conversations.